I am a 41-year-old, 185 pounds male. Though I have once taken about 20 milligrams of 5-MeO DMT by insufflation, the psychoactive results were negligible, so I consider the following to be an account of my first true encounter with this substance. 8:31 p.m. With the aid of my sitter, call him John, I held the glass pipe to my lips and drew a very long, slow drag until I could hold no more. I saw a wisp of alarmingly white smoke rise from the pipe before it was blown away by the large white cloud I exhaled. Just as John secured the pipe out of my hands, I felt the onset. I let go of the pipe, let myself fall back into John's inordinately comfortable couch, and then, all within a matter of a few seconds, was launched into the peak experience of the trip. Words now fail, of course, as, to a lesser extent, does my memory of these 4-day-old events. I know that I felt a tremendous surge of energy through my entire body, at first from my heart, or was it my brain, exploding out through my extremities, then imploding back, electric shear power, it now seems. Yet, as I imploded back, it was as though I disintegrated, got shuffled and then lost all concept of my physical body and the physical world surrounding it. Again, this is all within the first moments. There was tremendous sound, that of a tornado or jet engine. The visuals were very jumbled, a swirling, cracked mirror geometry with black and white and yellow and some red, the flag of Maryland in a washing machine? Seeming to move, to radiate very fast, yet hardly to change, mild, as hallucinatory images go. That which was not mild in any way was the emotional mental spiritual effect. My entire being my soul, I suppose, began to scream in anguish, in terror, in horror. This, surely, was the worst place in the universe for a human soul to be. I can't say why or how or what this was, it doesn't translate to our consensus reality. I just know that it took me utterly and horribly. I wanted to get out of there with every fiber of my being. After what was maybe 2 or 3 minutes of this, I came to believe that I was, in fact, in hell. Hell, the real place. No red demons with pitchforks, no fire, no frozen lakes, just pure, non-stop, overwhelming, spiritual torment. And it seemed to be eternal. I believed, not in the way we think normally or have a notion, but rather as an indisputable, immutable truth in the core of my small self, that I had made some huge mistake in my life, or bartered away my soul, these painful insights peering through the non-stop rage of the whole thing. Then the first real-world image came through, John's face, his eyeglasses oddly askew. He had procured and prepared the powder for me, therefore, I knew at the time, he was the devil. No, he was the devil. The devil exists, and he is John. He tricked me into doing this, and now I am paying with my soul, damned to everlasting, existential torment. If not the devil, then maybe some sort of vampire. I was suddenly, vaguely conscious of my body again, that I was lying back on the couch with my neck very exposed. I was beginning to come back, to come down, to leave hell. 8:38 p.m. To a slow syncopation, the rage subsided. I still was frequently overcome by waves of terror, but the spaces in between were familiar and quiet and dark, each one blessedly longer than the last. I noticed that my mouth was open and very dry, my throat sore. I couldn't muster the strength or the know-how, for that matter, to reach for or ask for my glass of water. This predicament got me to think about my hands and fingers, my feet, cold. I was not comfortable with my body position on the couch, but couldn't yet move. My heart was pounding, as was my forehead. I was inhaling vast, deep breaths, then pushing the air out with all the force I could muster, as if I were pushing out the drug, the devil, the experience, anything that could be pushed out. After a few minutes I knew that I could move my left hand. Its first chore was to rub, deeply, slowly, my clenched and throbbing forehead. The terror continued to pass. My ego came roaring back and tried to strategize its way back to ascendancy, encouraging me to lighten up. Hello Bedford Falls, hello, you old building and loan, or to analyze, and as to intensity, I figured that 5-MeO DMT is to LSD as LSD is to cannabis, or to become self-conscious, worrying me about what the appropriate first words to John might be, wondering what he saw. I was exhausted as I began to feel familiar physiological crutches clicking themselves back into place, the crutches of Dali never having made as much sense before. I bent one knee, then the other, getting my feet flat on the floor for a time, then letting them slide. I remained frightened. I pleaded with the universe? That I might never have to experience that again. I felt mild, occasional tremors run down an arm or leg or side and the very slightest nausea. I had fasted for 8 hours prior. John had told me before we began that he wouldn't say anything to me until I spoke to him. Perhaps I indulged this. I felt as though I wanted to sleep. Then John's phone rang. 9:30 p.m. John raced to turn down the answering machine, and I mustered a chuckle. "You alright?" he ventured. "Yeah," I breathed. And after a moment, "That was hell. You know, it's been an hour." I thought it had been somewhat shorter, maybe 40 minutes. He told me that I must metabolize tryptamines such as this at about half the normal rate, that most folks would have been up and conversable within a half hour. "Your throat must be sore," he said as he left to dig up lozenge, mentholyptus. I also accepted his offer for a cup of chamomile tea, which soon appeared in a mug featuring a Mary Engel Bright illustration and the words "snap" out of it. John rejoined me on the couch, and I asked him if I had said or done anything in this world during my trip to that one. He smiled and explained to me that I had screamed, at the top of my lungs, from the bottom of my guts, non-stop, for about 6 minutes, mostly no and fuck and occasionally please among the wordless screaming. He continued that I was among the 1 in 6 who physically moved during this experience and that my movement consisted of rocking forward and back, slapping both hands back and forth from the tops of my thighs to my forehead. I noticed that all other furniture, all breakables, anything with a hard edge was now on the far side of a 6-foot radius around me. He hadn't interrupted nor attempted to restrain me at the time, he said, because I didn't seem to be hurting myself, which was true. He told me that he had been about 4 or 5 minutes away from calling 911 when I sat up, looked him straight in the face and screamed with the intention of every shard of my existence that he was the devil and that he should get fucked, shortly afterwards sinking silently back into the couch. After a while he had seen my left hand move and knew that I would be all right. He went on to explain that he was not, in fact, the devil, though he had been called the Antichrist by someone several years ago under somewhat similar circumstances. We reasoned together about the circumstances that may have brought about such a dark episode when an experience of absolute bliss followed by joyous weeping more typically follows this powder's ingestion. John gently cautioned me off the seductive tracks of fate and design. 10:40 p.m. Feeling about 90% back to base level, I found that I could stand and that standing felt good and that, 2 mugs of chamomile and a glass of water later, it was also good that I could make my way to his bathroom. I told John that I hadn't yet been able to decide whether or not to thank him, but that I did appreciate his vigilance. I wasn't yet entirely convinced of his earthly mortality. I got in my car and drove home, avoiding freeways by driving right through the center of town, which, to my delight, had just been festooned with lights for the winter holidays. Arriving home, my wife smiled at me and said, offhandedly, "So, you shattered?" Seeing and hearing from me that I had, in fact, been through hell, she enveloped me with her matchless love and warmth and support, if not, entirely, understanding. She made me another cup of herbal tea and a slice of peanut butter toast, and we went to bed. With my heart and forehead still pounding, with my palpable fear that, should I give over my consciousness to dreaming, I might revisit the terror, and with my bladder in need of frequent emptying of all the tea, I didn't sleep until about 4:30 a.m. November 23rd and on. I was only able to sleep for about 3 hours. I woke up shaky, cautious, beat up. Throughout the day, which included a 2-hour business meeting, I experienced intensified colors and contrasts and the occasional wave of terror. These would start in my gut or groin, roll up into my head, and, I found, were best released with a quiet but open scream. I never knew my jaw could open that wide. I became frightened that these waves might accompany me for the rest of my days and frightened of eternal damnation, a new fear to me. In the late afternoon, I smoked some cannabis, which proved to be a great blessing. Most of my fear left. I relaxed. I took great joy in the simple acts of walking the dog and preparing food. Finally, at about 24 hours after takeoff, I felt to be at 100% baseline consciousness. I was asleep by midnight and racked up a good 9 or 10 hours. I awoke the next day feeling fantastic, bright and cheerful, happy and thankful to be alive, to have this human body and this life on this beautiful planet meek in my knowledge of the limitations of human consciousness. I'll continue to wrestle with the ontology of the whole thing for some time, I suspect, and try not to think too much about my new fear. I look forward to a particularly rich Thanksgiving. Substance, 5 Mayu DMT. Method, free-based. Dosage, a lungful, actual quantity in spoon unknown. Setting, a 3-day, 2-night party. Those of us indulging in this particular substance were in a small bedroom, adjacent to the main living room where most of the mellow party was going on. Other factors: I had dosed on 15 milligrams of 2CB and 3 capsules full of powdered mushrooms the previous night. I was certainly baseline before taking the 5-MeU, but it is possible that my experience was affected by residual effects on my neurons, kidneys, etc. I normally take a balanced multivitamin each day, and I am fairly certain I remembered to have one that evening with a meal a couple of hours before dosing. My mental state was mainly one of frustration and impatience, feeling that my psychedelic experience of the night before was largely a futile rehashing of the same unanswerable questions and unresolved problems I've been dealing with throughout my life. I hoped that 5-MeU DMT would be the thing to push me through to a clearer level. Note: at the last minute, I informed my significant other, Jay, who at the time was in the living room adjacent to where I would be smoking the 5-MeU, that I would be indulging in this new substance that night. The players: E, who was also taking 5-MeU for the first time. M, who had experienced this substance for the first time the previous night, snorted, and was having a go of smoking it this time. P, our ground control, spoon holder, and caretaker. The lead-in. After some debate and confusion over whether snorting or smoking would be the better method for some or all of us, we finally all settled on smoking. He was handed a small tube, shorter but a little wider than a large drinking straw. P held a large spoon containing a dollop of 5-MeU with 2 lighters beneath it, instructing E to begin inhaling slowly through the tube as soon as the smoke got thick. E got a lungful, said something like, "Here I go," and fell back on the pillow. I was not certain whether P then added more substance to the spoon before giving M a turn, but I suspect so. M inhaled, waved, and said goodbye while falling back onto the other pillow with an enormous grin. I believe that P added more substance to the spoon before handing the inhaling tube to me. I found the smoke surprisingly light and easy to take in. By the time I tasted it in the back of my throat, it had me. All I could manage to say was something like, "Gah," thrusting the tube wildly in P's direction, as I fell back on the blanket bunched against the wall, turning inside out through my chest. Disclaimer: the following events may be partially or completely misremembered and/or inaccurately portrayed. Statements and quotations may or may not have been actually uttered by the person they are attributed to, or thought by me at the time. The experience. Purgatory. Neither here nor there. A fuzzy white bubble of crumpled time. One fractured moment, jumping around like a DVD randomly skipping between tracks. It tries to decide if this is heaven or hell, and cannot resolve this. It burns us and it freezes, precious. Torment and ecstasy rolled all together in a tight little ball. She's right. It's not like anything. Later, someone tells me that DMT is similar. Similar? How could anything be similar? What could possibly be like that, without being that? M says, it's always like this. Someone else says, or is supposed to say, but it's different this time. Scattered laughter. P says, do you want me to close the door, so it will always be dark? This has always been said. All of this has always happened. I say clever things like, shit, and fuck, while I think, always, why did I do that? Now I'm trapped here forever. I wonder if my body will die in this room, or dematerialize, or if it will go on, perhaps with some other entity at the helm, seeming to live out the rest of my life while this consciousness remains in this moment for eternity. Maybe this is the point where I wake up in my mother's womb, destined to live this same pointless life up to this moment, memory wiped but for the occasional, inexplicable deja vu and an unshakable sense of foreboding. I cackle with lunatic irony. Condemning oneself to eternal damnation is hilarious, when you think about it. The whole scenario inverts and repeats, eternally. There is a buzzing sound, like a handsaw. Hzzzzzzz. E. Hzzzzzzz. E. Jay is beside me. You are hyperventilating, says Jay. And so I am. The buzzing noises me. I sit up. Hands in the air, shuddering, I try to slow my breathing. Holy shit, I say, grinning from ear to ear. Nobody realizes that the grin is an expression of my amusement at being eternally damned. You don't say, says Jay, with a curious/worried/amused look. Multiple orgasms? asks Em. No. Kind of. Yeah, I guess. Not really. It's everything, says Em to Jay, as always. You wanna go there? No, I say, quite emphatically. I can't bear the thought of Jay having to be trapped here too. No, says Jay, following the script. I know that about you. says M. Eternally. Must break the causal loop, is my urgent and only thought. Yes, my brain at that moment had chosen to paraphrase a line from the movie Happy Accidents, still freshly imprinted on my fragile neurons, as I cleverly exclaimed "God damn it," and lunged clumsily for the door. Through the door, the bubble of time stretches and breaks around me. I feel streamers of time bubbles still clinging to me, but they gradually dissolve as I concentrate all of my being on interacting with the others outside, trying to form coherent words to describe what is happening to me. What had happened? Past tense. Now. That's better. As Jay settles beside me, I implore, if I ever tell you I want to do that again, talk me out of it. Immediately, I begin thinking of circumstances under which I would consider taking this drug again. Recovery and physical effects. Although nobody was keeping track of the time, and the subjective experience lasted for eternity, the entire episode up to this point probably took no more than a few minutes, somewhere between 5 and 20. Recovery largely involved lying on my back, breathing deeply, and attempting to describe what I experienced to concerned onlookers. It eventually came to me that not only was the hardwood floor under my back rather cold, but my presence there, fervently gasping precious life back into my body, was probably a bit of a bummer to the people attempting to talk and play games there in the living room. With some help from Jay, I made my way upstairs to the darker, quieter, sleeping/chill area upstairs, where I could finish recovering in a warm bed without bothering people. My body seems to have been almost completely anesthetized by the drug, and numbness in the roof of my mouth and extremities persisted for quite a while after I initially fled the smoking room, probably at least 30 minutes to an hour. For the next hour or two after that, my muscles would occasionally convulse as they continued to awaken, though I did not find this painful. It was rather nice to not be feeling the usual chronic pain in my back and hips. After lying in the bed for perhaps 15 to 30 minutes, I got up and did a little bit of slow, cautious yoga, hoping to align my muscles and bones the best I could before they remembered their usual cramped positions. After crawling back into bed, I lay wide awake, eyes open, for what may have been several hours, even after Jay curled up next to me and went to sleep. During that period, I wanted to take in as much of waking reality as possible, and was not eager to lose control of my consciousness to sleep. When I eventually did find myself drifting off, I was jarred awake several times by the sensation that I was slipping back into the drug state again, fully re-experiencing the conversation and sensations of that eternal moment as if I had never left it. Eventually, I did manage to get a little bit of real sleep. It is worth noting that I felt no nausea at all, through any of it. I have found that with almost any drug, I am better off if I consume a reasonably sized meal about 2 to 4 hours before dosing. This seems to settle my stomach quite effectively. I understand that many other people have the opposite reaction with this and other drugs, finding that eating first just gives their churning stomachs something to spew. This may be connected to my hypoglycemia, meaning that preventing a blood sugar spike or drop may be the key for me in keeping my stomach happy. In the next couple of nights, I found myself briefly slipping back into the drug state for brief periods while dreaming, without being jarred awake. This has been a much more pleasant experience than the previous terror of being trapped in that moment forever. I awaken feeling good about it, though I don't recall much of the dream clearly in normal, waking consciousness. I have also occasionally felt on the verge of re-entering that state while awake, simply by concentrating on remembering the sensation of it. I believe that with much effort and practice, I could bring myself there at will. The questions are whether I really want to go there, and if so, what would I do with it? Post-analysis. Not a recreational drug. If you're looking for a lighthearted experience with pretty colors and fun, I can't recommend this stuff. The experience was intense beyond imagining, and probably worthwhile, but not what I'd call fun. On the other hand, I am a person who tends to have difficulty simply enjoying the experience of a hallucinogen without feeling the need to use the opportunity to deal with important issues, which is one reason why I really should not be taking them at parties, so take this with a grain of salt. Then again, I've never had what I would call a bad trip because I see every trip as a learning experience and an analytical tool rather than a qualitatively good or bad experience. However you look at it, I'll be dealing with this experience for quite some time, likely for the rest of my life. Not a thing to be taken lightly. One of my first thoughts, as life crept back in, was that this experience had made clear to me that decades of meditation and mental conditioning to achieve a state like that would have been worth it to get there in a gentler, more organic way. I resort to chemical methods to achieve higher mind states in part because I am lazy and impatient and feel that I lack the discipline to get there on my own. However, as previous trips with other substances have hinted, the chemical way is actually the hard way. At the very least, I think I'd have an easier time of it if I were in good physical condition before undergoing something like this. Good circulation and healthy organs would likely enhance the experience itself, as well as improving the recovery. Having a more positive general outlook, as well as more experience in consciously shifting mind states would most likely be helpful as well. And I'm sure it wouldn't hurt to have my chakras all aligned and spinning properly going in. All of these things would certainly be improved with regular exercise, meditation, and yoga. I'd want to prepare the physical space better too, which for me would mean some sort of ritual cleansing, and surrounding myself with the right scenery, mandalas, ritual objects, and sounds, gentle, ambient music or chanting, to help me keep a particular focus. In short, it may be impossible to ever be fully prepared for an experience as unique as this, but I'm sure it's possible to be better prepared than I was. At the very least, choose a space that's suitable to the type of experience you'd like to have, and have a goal, general focus, or at least some idea of what you'd like to reach for. Ira would note, the dose described in this report is very high, potentially beyond Irowid's heavy range, and could pose serious health risks or result in unwanted, extreme effects. Sometimes extremely high doses reported are errors rather than actual doses used. I have never smoked drugs before, so I need some instruction from my sitters. I am told to inhale slowly and steadily, and to take 2 breaths, and to lay down on the bed I was sitting on when I feel like it. I have been resistant to mind-expanding drugs in the past, and I have had some benefit from inhaling nitrous oxide to trigger the primary drug, so I prepare a pair of nitrous chargers, should the effect of the 5-MeU be too mild or slow in coming on. My sitters, experienced with this substance, are amused at my concerns, but perfectly agreeable to my preparations. I inhale the substance as sitter number 1 holds the lighter under the pipe, and draw long and slow, as suggested, perhaps over 10 to 15 seconds. I was concerned that it would be hot or smoky, but it feels relatively clean and cool. I am not sure whether to hold my breath afterward, so I hold it for 5 seconds or so, then start to ask my sitters whether that was enough. My attempt to speak proves more challenging than I expect, and my vision begins to blur. I know that I am higher than I had ever been. Very, very intense. The exhalation has an unpleasant flavor I hadn't noticed on the inhale, but nothing to be concerned about. My sitters encourage me to take the second draw from the pipe, and I am still able to perceive it and follow their instructions, so I inhale again, long and slow. I probably close my eyes, because the visual blurring is quite confusing. About 2/3 of the way through that inhalation, I become concerned that perhaps I am ingesting too much, and that restraint might be called for. I stop sucking the pipe, finish my breath with clean air, and lay down on the bed. At least, that must be what happens. As I said, I was already extremely affected by the drug before the second inhalation, and I stopped smoking because I was nervous. I am nervous because very, very big things are happening very, very fast. Holy shit. I love roller coasters, and skydiving, and intense, terrifying rushes. That's good, because the intensity and terror of this rush is much greater than any I have ever experienced. It is so much greater than my experience or expectation that I attempt to verbalize my concern that things are going awry. My sitters reassure me that everything is okay, this is normal, and that I have nothing to worry about. I do not hear or understand their words, and I am not sure my words came out. I am not sure they spoke at all. Such a concept is incomprehensible, since neither they, nor I, actually exist in any meaningful sense. Nevertheless, I somehow absorb their reassurances, and I back down from the rising panic and accept the experience, trying to go with the flow. I am one with the universe, experiencing simultaneous rapid expansion and contraction. There are no visuals or sounds, no tastes or smells or touch, because there is no body to experience these senses. There is no me to experience my body. There is a sense of hugeness and velocity, and an eternity of time in which absolutely nothing is happening, but it's happening at panic-inducing speed. Things are happening too quickly for my taste, so I attempt to get a grip on myself, to slow things down and assess the situation. This attempt to reduce velocity is completely worthless. I have absolutely no control over this experience or myself. Again I attempt to express unease verbally, and I am unsure of my success, but again I receive reassurance from the part of myself that is sitter number 2. I can't hear or understand her words, but I know that she is calm and confident, and that helps me to stay on the side of the line that is fright and thrill, and not on the other side, on which lies panic and terror and madness. I try to relax into it. The experience is unrelenting. Time goes on, and on, and on, and I cannot make it stop. I slowly come to the realization that it is entirely possible that this will never, ever stop, and this state may well be something I just have to get used to. I do not remember what my life before the eternal now was like, but I do know that the intense nowness is not something I am prepared for. If this is how things are going to be, I am going to have to make serious changes to my lifestyle. But I must, because if this is how things are going to be, then this is how things are going to be. I may as well accept it. The world as I knew it is gone forever, and eternal rocketing universality is all I can expect for the backward and forward in time that is everything. There is no thought. There is no time. There is no world. There is only all. Nothing changes. Ever. And then there are hints of the world returning. I reach out with my hands and pull sitter number 2 to my body, pressing my face into her neck, willing myself to slide my soul into her body, since I know she is in the world, where I would like to be again. She is a lifeline, a beacon, a landmark for me to find my way back. My gratitude for her being there as my guide is overwhelming. As my sense of me returns, I feel embarrassed at my attempts to become one with her and piggyback on her attachment to reality, and I relax my death/life grip, though I still hold her tightly, grateful at her physicality, and her reassurance, and her support. I imprint on her like a duckling fresh from an egg. I am back. There are conversations. How do you feel? I am enormously relieved to be back in the world, perceiving sounds, and sights, and holding a wonderful human who has rescued me from the eternal. I open my mouth to explain what I have experienced, but there are no words. I slowly shake my head and open my mouth like a drowning fish, willing something meaningful to communicate. It was big. I know they can hear the capital B. And fast. It was big and fast. My heart is beating, I am breathing, and these are good, excellent things, demonstrating that I am here. Would you like that nitrous now? Sitter 1 asks with a laugh. This is hysterically funny. But no, not funny at all. No, I do not. My mind has been rattled around inside my head quite ferociously, and what I need now is to let all the marbles find their way back to their slots. Reality is totally incredibly awesome, and I am grateful and relieved that I get to go back. We converse, discussing the experience. I have no words to describe what happened, but they've done it before, and we share a memory without words. I am told that the entire experience lasted about 5 minutes. On the one hand, I was attempting to communicate more or less non-stop, and I had only said 2 or 3 things. I am frightened, so the time was brief. On the other hand, it was forever. If they told me it was 15 seconds or 4 hours, I would have to take their word for it. If they said 2 weeks, I'd need explanations for how my physical needs had been taken care of. I thanked my hosts profusely for the enormous experience, and assured them that while I was deeply terrified, this was in no way unpleasant. I am thankful that the situation was set up such that there was nothing to worry about, and when I got to the line between terror and panic, I could stay on the side that made the experience, I am hesitant to say pleasant, but something like that. I could have crossed that line into panic in the bad place, but their reassurances and caretaking made sure that didn't happen. Recovery was easy. My body felt fine. I was able to sit up, drink water, talk. I took it easy for a few minutes before attempting to sit up, and relaxed on the bed for an hour or more. Talked about the experience for a while, though I had no context for what had happened. Got a good night's sleep. From time to time over the next couple of days, I would recall that sense of rushing enormitude, and I'd become anxious that I was going to leave the world again, but only a little. It's going to take me a while to absorb the experience. I am extraordinarily glad I did it, and I wholeheartedly do not recommend this drug to those looking for a fun experience. I am not easily frightened, nor taken to despair. Those who are should avoid this. Doing it without competent and soothing sitters would be bad. Wow. I had read a lot about dimethyltryptamine, and even wrote a report about it for a pharmacology course I was taking in university. Wanting to get my hands on some regular DMT, and stupidly not knowing the difference between 5-MeO and DMT, I nearly shit myself when my friend told me he had got his hands on some. I immediately wanted to try it, as did several other friends. Being obsessive-compulsive, previously treated for OCD, but currently off medication, I was still rather iffy about the substance, and so I decided to go last, and gauge my friend's reactions to a 5 mg dose. My first friend, D, Took 10 milligrams in a single hit, almost finishing it all, and was super effed before the smoke was out of his mouth. D's wife, J, hit the pipe immediately after, taking around 5 milligrams and barely getting anything. Q and I sat on the couch opposite them and just kind of gauged how they took it, extremely well. D had a shit-eating grin on his face for roughly 10 minutes, making strange noises every once in a while, and seeming rather shocked, while J had taken off outside to look at trees. Both seemed extremely euphoric and just in love with the world. After seeing this, Q and I decided we would give it a go, so our supplier/sitter loaded up 5 milligrams for Q, who took it and immediately sank into his chair. Next up was me. Assuming I was taking 5 milligrams, I lifted the bowl to my mouth and the nervousness of the upcoming trip was making me extremely anxious. I had sweaty hands, a racing heart, and bad mindset. The feelings of anxiety made the come up extremely unpleasant. Another thing is I had never done psychedelics. No zoomies, no LSD, no peyote, nothing. I was an avid cannabis enthusiast, and had dabbled in my fair share of OTC/hospital analgesics. Anyways, with the pipe up to my mouth, I lit the bowl and began to inhale. I took a bigger hit of 5 mayo DMT than anything I had ever taken in my life, a good around 20 seconds deep inhale. As I let the smoke out of my mouth, I asked, "I'm doing 5 milligrams right?" And our supplier responded, "No dude, I loaded you 10 milligrams, and holy fuck that was a big hit." Before I could let the smoke out it felt like I was hit by a train, and I began to panic. I wanted to back out, but I was past the point of no return. All the color seemed to fade out of the room, and only mundane, oblique, grayscale colors remained. J, now sober, had returned from outside and passed in front of me, heading into my kitchen. I remember seeing her in 3 places at once, each with a large tracer/vapor trail behind her, forming a path into the kitchen. I felt like I could see in 4 dimensions, kind of like the worm tunneling in Donnie Darko. At the same time, my body was experiencing a huge rush, kind of like the first time you ride on a shoddy aircraft and they max the throttle for takeoff, what I imagine astronauts experience when entering space. With that rush came the feeling of nausea. My stomach had jumped into my throat and my heart, already beating extremely fast, began to beat even faster. At this point in time, my upstairs neighbor thought it would be a good idea to play downward scales on her clarinet upstairs. The sound of her clarinet, in retrospect they are recognizable as clarinet sounds, sounded like what Transformers sound like when turning into Autobots in the blockbuster movies, a sort of dubsteppy, choppy, high-pitched reverberating bass. Then, being sat in front of an open window, I heard cars driving through the street outside. I could hear every stone crunch under their tires, and I started to feel a bit overwhelmed. Then I closed my eyes and just saw black. I felt like I was blacking out. I've blacked out a ton of times, and I don't mean drinking-wise. The nausea built up, as did my body temperature, and I felt really sweaty and panicked as I thought I had overdosed and was dying. Then my body dissolved, freaking the shit out of me. A slight tingling in my extremities upon inhale had built up to become almost intolerable. I could compare the feeling to that of having a limb go completely numb, and I mean completely, as if it won't even move by conscious will, and then reawaken with the needles. But multiply the needles by 1,000 times. It felt as though my arms and legs were fusing with the air around me. I remember thinking to myself, this is just a trip. The 5-MeO is just binding 5-HT receptors in your brain and effing you up a bit. You're okay. Just focus on your breathing. So I focused on my breathing, which had become rather difficult. In retrospect, it was probably due to the time dilation. Soon I felt much better, and when I closed my eyes, all I could see were daisies and mountainous landscape. I opened my eyes to realize that I too, like D earlier, just had a shit-eating grin on my face, but I was super sweaty. I couldn't move my arms, nor could I open my mouth. The inside of my teeth felt wonderful, as did the aftertaste of the 5-MeO DMT. Then without me even thinking to say it, my mouth opened and out came "My mouth feels funny." Everyone in the room laughed, and I had the most euphoric body high. Kind of like if you've ever stayed up for around 72 hours, then right on the verge of unconsciousness, you smoke a fat joint, and you trick your body into feeling wonderful to move, again, multiplied by 1,000 times, that's what I felt. I then remembered how to move my arms, and I wiped the sweat from my forehead, and began to walk around the room. Approximately 12 minutes had passed since inhale, and I was extremely pale, and still a little nauseated, but I couldn't stop smiling. Color had returned to the room, but everything had a slight yellow tinge to it. I also still had tracers. Within a few minutes I was still experiencing a body high, but largely dumbed down. My supplier had returned to the room, and said, "Oh, you're back. How was the trip?" I had completely forgotten I had smoked twice what I was anticipating. In reality, my supplier told me I smoked around 13 milligrams, plus around 1/3 of Q's hit, which he did not finish, plus all the resin built up from the 15 milligrams D&J had smoked 20 minutes earlier, making my dose around 20 milligrams. The days following, I experienced severe delirium, and loss of sense. Looking back, I believe it was an enjoyable experience, although at a lower dose would have been more enjoyable. Have since tried a lower dose and enjoyed it more. For anyone trying it, I would recommend 10 milligrams tops. Don't hold on to any feelings of panic/despair when entering the trip. Just focus on your breathing and remember it will be over in like 10 minutes. The feeling of my body dissolving was extremely uncomfortable, but it seemed as if my ego was holding me back from the trip. Thought, it's the ego that's dissolving, so let it go. It feels so much better after. Don't expect anything. It's different for everyone. But don't try and take control. Just let go as you are totally helpless to what's happening. The 5 Mayu is taking you on a ride through its stomping grounds, so just let go. Be sure to weight out your dose on an analytical balance. I have since realized, the reason for my severe nausea/sweating/heart rate/delirium following the trip was probably due to serotonin toxicity due to 5 Mayu's non-specificity when binding to 5-HT receptors, unlike DMT which has preferential targets, so be careful and definitely weigh it out to 0.1 milligrams so you know the precise amount you are taking. Eyeballing can be extremely dangerous. But anyways, that was my trip. Thanks for reading. A true entheogen, in my experience. My second journey with synthetic 5-Mayu DMT. This is not a suggestion to do 5-Mayu DMT. It is only my experience. See disclaimer below my trip report. My second sacred encounter. For the second time in 6 months I've experienced a state of sublime that has left me wondering. I wonder, why we, as a species, especially in the West, are so caught down in the everyday. I wonder, how the perpetuation of the lie, "you have to," is so strong and pervasive in our society and becoming more and more prevalent in the world. I wonder, if the conscious shift will ever reach a point of enough souls to share a better, more loving and kind collective dream of life. I wonder, why I'm still here and what is there that I really need to do. I wonder, if yoga teachers will ever slow down enough to start teaching yoga. I wonder, why money is our god today and why we don't own that thought so we can change it. I wonder about this kindness bestowed to me. I wonder, what it will be like next time. I wonder how there can be so much gratitude, joy, and love. As I prepared for my second journey with synthetic 5-Mayu DMT, apprehension was noticed, that outright fear was what I observed as I set up a sacred space in our living room. My wonderful spouse helped move the furniture and place a special rug in the center of the room. She would be my sitter this time, which was also a source of some concern. I was thoughtful to what she could possibly witness or have to do if things were not pleasant. I oriented my yoga mat and pillow with the head to face the west. The setting was complete. Next, the music was set up to play. Earlier I crushed some fresh mint and pressed it into the bowl of my small bong, then sprinkled in the nearly 15 milligrams freebase crystal with another small amount of mint on top. My original guide suggested this so as not to burn the crystal with an open flame, which would render it useless. I tamped it gently, hoping it was not too much substrate. I settled on the mat. I looked at my wife and announced that I was scared. By now I had come to know the potential of this substance and the possible uncomfortable outcomes, having seen too many awful videos and having read too many accounts of terrible experiences. It made me question the reason for such experiences. My hope was that these were largely brought on by the ego's inability to let go into the experience and the need for it to make sense, and the ego's need to be aware through the entire process of the moments which occur. It is my belief that annihilation must be the ego's greatest concern. Since my first experience in May, I have read books, seen videos and spoken to experts in this work, and have come to an understanding of how much respect, integrity and intention would be best to go into the use of this true entheogen. I also understood from them that the beauty and glory to be experienced in the essence of the oneness of the universe is also a repeatable phenomenon. It was a mindful and purposeful day so far. We had been to a yoga class in the morning, had a lunch together and had bonded some. My heart was calm and somewhat open already, and my mind was in a quiet space. No matter what fear I did feel, I yearned to that white space again and experience that which is all in the loving nature of what is. To have this experience had been on my heart and mind for about a month. The timing, set and setting were all that I was waiting for. September 10, 2019 would be my second coming, so to speak. I started my ritual of settling my mind and becoming present to the moment we were in. It isn't that I'm religious or look to idols, but I have found the practice of some focusing activity like the one I'll describe to calm and focus my mind to the present. As I focused my attention on calling in the directions, something I learned doing men's work, my wife sat and subtly started playing one of her singing bowls. We both witnessed each other creating a container together for the first time in this manner. I don't take that intention for granted. I have a deeper appreciation for her as my partner. I finished and asked her for silence. She came closer, we looked in each other's eyes and I stated, "I'm scared," with a sheepish smile. She smiled and acknowledged my fear and handed me the pipe. She said, "You just have to decide." It was time. Before I started, I proposed that if it looked like I was struggling, to have her place her hand gently on my forehead to ground me as my original guide professed during my first session. She nodded in understanding. She was calm and I sensed she was in this moment with me, and no matter what, she had my back. She held the bottom of the pipe as I started. I fired the lighter and slowly heated the herb. I drew slowly and steadily as the mint started to smoke. I could see the red embers grow as I drew the smoke into the glass chamber. I started to taste some of the 5-MeO. I thought I had gotten enough, pulled the bowl and inhaled all the smoke from the chamber, then let go of the pipe into her care. I held my breath and laid back on the pillow. I felt a buzzing sensation in my head and released the breath, though it would turn out to be too early. I immediately felt fear vanish as my heart started slowing after beating strongly and rapidly in the beginning. The thought, "How silly you are to be afraid," occurred to me. I relaxed and felt a sense of safety. I knew I hadn't gotten enough of a hit, so I asked my wife for the pipe and sat back up to hit it again. This time I took a much longer draw and the taste of crystal was much stronger. I inhaled all I could. Again, I let go of the pipe and laid back. The sensations of vibration and heart opening rushed over me and were quickly overwhelming. I felt the sense of me or I slip away and became an observer. It is a challenge to describe the experience from this point. There was awareness during the entire journey, but the perspective was like that of an observer. The emotional state was that of overwhelming gratitude, joy and love only. It felt like the body was a vessel now and was moved to sing. The music I used was Brian Eno, discrete music. I could hear the body singing "I love you" in harmony with the music, as though that was the meaning of the notes in Eno's music. The voice was very high, like falsetto, but felt totally natural and also as though it was singing through my body. It was so foreign to hear. It was soothing and felt as though it was not my voice but that of the one using my body to express its nature. The neck arched, head tilted back, mouth now wide, waves of love and joy surged through the whole body, the heart burst open, tears started to stream from the eyes. Sounds emanated from deep within the body, uttering "I love you" in song over and over, as if the universe was singing the body as an instrument. It sang my wife's name, my original guide's name. Ecstasy was my being and the feeling of orgasm from everywhere was present. If you can imagine at the end of the movie The Fifth Element, that's kind of what it would look like. My God. How? Why? What is this purpose? Gratitude. More sound through my body. How beautiful the resonance of the sound and vibration moving through me. Like being a singing bowl struck perfectly to create an ideal vibration harmonizing with all of existence. No pain, no thought, no meaning-making bullshit in my mind, only the writing of the experience and being the note. Auto infinity. Gratitude for the experience, again, in this life before I die, and to live to express it to others so they might be inspired to seek more than the mundane our made-up societies instill into us. There is so much more. We must slow down. It is here for us all and does not cost a penny. All that is required is the willingness to seek it. It's true. I knew I was not going to witness the pure light this time, but it didn't matter. This was so much more than enough. As I started to descend, the thought of taking another hit occurred, but I resisted. I don't know why. I was sure there was more in the bowl but did not want to go further at that moment. I was so content just to be. I sat up. I was in a simple cross-legged position which felt natural and right at the time. I started moving my limbs in a symmetrical fashion. It seemed like qigong. I was like light. Every movement of my body divine. I moved slowly but without any thought of what I looked like. I flowed like water or fire, being ever so subtly moved by air or a divine breath. My consciousness looked at me, and as I noticed, I saw a reflection of crystal white and infinite black as a body, yin and yang. My mind shimmered. Tears flowed. More gratitude. Fuck. Then elation. I gently touched my face. My hands were cool and dry. My face felt warm and the sensation sent waves of gratitude for my life through my mind. Ah! By now I could feel my breath passing inside my body. When I inhaled, I noticed the inside of the center of my chest. An idea emerged of embers from the intersection of my collarbones to my belly button. When I breathed in, it was slow enough not to move a flame. I observed the most exquisite sensation radiating throughout my torso. It was like heat, but what was stoked was the most profound sense of love. Imagine if you blew gently on a log attempting to sweetly ignite a flame. A new essence of sensation swept through my soul. When I sat still and noticed this phenomenon, it remained. It reminded me of when yoga teachers announced to focus on the breathe. I thought, this is what that means. What idiots, they don't know what they are talking about. This is it. It's the gentleness, though, not just the breathing, it's how it feels as we do it. Stillness is the key. How it is so missed. This is something I continue to feel today as I write the experience and simply focus my attention on the breathing in a subtle and ever so slow manner. It is akin to tasting the most delicious, sweetest nectar for the first time, and what happens when we notice and appreciate the new experience. Later, the realization occurred to me, how we continue to think we are moving slow enough to see to experience life. I've not been able to do it on my own at this depth. This miracle of a molecule takes me to a much higher level. It slows my being down to now and allows me to experience it. My thousands of hours of meditation has not been enough, so far. Good God. Good God. Good God. How can I be in this space without the use of this master teacher? Will I ever still enough before this body dies? I cannot say this is an experience of God, but it is something so perfect that whatever created it must be smiling, if it can, when it notices us having it. Angels must sing if there are such beings. In the face of experience, it doesn't matter if they exist or not. It is an experience from which religions are born, most likely. That would make sense to me. I was calm throughout and so grateful. My wife appeared to me as a perfect angel when I sat up and we eye-gazed. Wow, was she amazing, not moving, just noticing, and simply being there for me. This is the ultimate act of love, to me, to sit quietly for another and be as still as possible. I felt so grateful for her. We were quiet for some time, then I asked her to describe what she saw, which validated where I was in my experience. My intention was to experience sacred and overwhelming gratitude, joy and love coursing through this body in a way I have not otherwise. Mission accomplished. It happened and has validated that using 5-MeO DMT in this manner, for me, is possible to produce this effect. It has allowed me to have a deeper connection with all of life as well as a deeper appreciation for life. Till next time. Disclaimer. My experience may be unique and is definitely not everyone's. This entheogen is not for everyone. This is not like other psychedelic substances I've encountered which last much longer and the ego is there every nanosecond of the ride. It is the most powerful and overwhelming experience of surrendering consciously while aware I've ever known. I'm not suggesting it, but, if you do decide it is free, then, seek out videos and reports of all experiences so you know it is possible. Seek out those who have had many experiences with this substance and older experts who practice transpersonal psychology, my opinion only, if you are looking for healing. I understand the unpleasant side because of what I've read and seen and heard from others directly or indirectly. I'm not suggesting to do it, but it would be wonderful if everyone who is seeking could have an experience like mine or more amazing and experience the same sacred connection, ecstasy and wonder. I make up that it would change anyone's entire appreciation for our existence and life itself. I am not suggesting to have an experience with 5-MeO DMT or any other substance. Do research if you are seeking to have the experience. There are only a few good, conscious and most importantly selfless practitioners out there. Do your research and seek out what harm reduction means. Do your research and see what it means to be a good facilitator, sitter, practitioner. Money and ego will not be part of the description. Don't be fooled into thinking a shaman or guide or some authority figure or counselor or coach is necessary to have the experience either. They will keep you safe. Do your research. The molecule, 5-MeO DMT, is the master here. There is not a noticeable difference between the synthetic form or venom from Bufo alvarius. Don't use the venom. These gentle creatures are endangered and should be left alone. This is not a suggestion to do 5-MeO DMT. Dose. Approximately 15 mg synthetic, freebase form, smoked from a bong placed in the bowl in layers of crushed mint leaf, 5-MeO DMT, crushed mint leaf, slow steady draw, hold breath to capacity, lay back and let go. I took 2 hits this time. The first was not enough. Now that 5-MeO-DMT is Schedule 1 in the United States, I have been thinking a lot about it. I have decided to share an experience with this drug that changed my life, in ways, changed it for the better, and in other ways, for the worse. At this time in my life, I had experimented heavily with MDXX, LSD, cannabis, and dextromethorphan, and lightly with amphetamine, opiates, and cocaine. I had a couple of previous experiences with 5-MeO-DMT that were universe-shattering, and a few other experiences that were lackluster. 1. Prelude. Me and a friend decided to spend a weekend in the Ocala National Forest expanding our consciousness. We had brought nothing but 5-MeO-DMT and some herb. The first night, as we sat in our tent, we decided it was time to break out the pipe. We weighed out exactly 25 milligrams, 10 milligrams higher than I have ever previously used. My friend went first, but never really got too far off the ground. Then it was my turn. I put the flame to the pipe, let it settle, and began inhaling. Before the smoke could even be exhaled. 2. Ascension. It feels like I jumped on the top thrill dragster roller coaster at Cedar Point but then realized I forgot to buckle my seatbelt, but it's alright because I also feel like I was given an anesthetic dose of some kind of tranquilizer right when I was about to freak out, figurative, of course, because I wanted to scream, but was pretty much paralyzed. And then I really get scared when the roller coaster took off at a blistering speed and flew off the tracks, out of the tent, up the trees, through the clouds and into outer space at warp speed. I wanted to scream for help. I regretted taking so much, but that tranquilized feeling just wouldn't let me, and on my way to the center of the universe the speed eventually became tolerable. As time/space bent around me, I knew that back on Earth I must have missed a million years and would return to nothing. This is the last I remember of my ego. It dissolved out there, somewhere in the terrestrial plane. 3. Between matter and nothingness. Space light. Crimson water over blackness, shadows from the other world enter, they twitch and dance within as the tide of light recedes. Shadows of fire. Of clouds. The starlight is filtered through a mirror, only peeking through is blinding human and animal-shaped light. Here, whatever I am is at the center of a spiraling system, perhaps insignificant itself as a passing atom in the world we're familiar with, but to whatever I am, it is my sustenance. This is the weight towards which we fall, the weight that pulls planets to suns, to each other, pulling universe to universe, the Big Bang and what came before it. An ongoing explosion, in a color on the spectrum's edge beyond the perceptibility of the eye. There is a window there. I look in. 4. The window. James Lathrop. Born 1924. Served in Korean War. Was a merchant marine, had 6 children. He was a conservative man. The most he ever saw of the world outside of Ohio was New York City when he was stationed there. Got tricked into dancing with a drag queen. Before that was a common thing, and the boys never let him live it down. After that he swore off cities and lived the rest of his life in small towns, worked at a car dealership, and never made much money. Married a quiet Christian woman named Marilyn. Gave birth to 6 children. All of them had the initials DJ, had a drinking problem, and loved Mountain Dew. He died March 4, 1985 after suffering a heart attack on his way to visit relatives in Xenia, Ohio. This is the day I was born. 5. The Hallway of Souls. After living his life, in my trip, I became his soul, and I was pulled into a field that looked like one infinite hallway, where there were billions, no, gazillions of these orb-shaped souls. They all gave off a different energy, and I could feel which ones were humans and which ones were animals and which ones were blades of grass and butterflies. Every single one of these orb soul spirits looked unique, as if they were designed by an artist to reflect the experiences of each particular soul. Some were coarse and jagged, some were black with glowing orbs spinning around them. I remember particularly one that I could feel belonged, currently, to a horse. It was bleeding a blue syrup and was encircled by rings of honeybees, which is doubly odd, because each honeybee would have had its own orb as well. It was beautiful. Mine was covered in wilting, black rose-like flowers and had little pods, like a chrysalis, full of fire hanging from the stem of each one. Eventually, his soul was guided to this giant gaping hole which looked eerily similar to a vagina, by this strange figure with no arms or legs, but mosquito-like wings and a face that was made out of electricity. He shoved the soul into the vagina-like orifice. And I was shot through a tunnel, and then awoke, coming out of a vagina. It was my mother's vagina. I watched myself get born, but just like James' life, I had no control over the infantile me. A voice said to me, as I stared out of baby me's eyes, in a language that wasn't English, but that I could understand, "You will return, forever and always, so long as there is particles in the universe, but for now, You have trespassed the borders. And also something about holding on to the new knowledge but not letting it dictate my future. 6. Epilogue. I left that forest the same day. I have never gone back. I spent countless hours looking for James Lathrop's name. It dictated a good deal of my free time for 2 years. I suffered through derealization, a mental health hospitalization, and depression. I am far better now. I have realized that this man does not exist. It was a creation of my imagination, and of the chemical. But to this day, I am still haunted from time to time. I have dreams at night where I remember the way he felt on the happiest day of his life, when his son David said to him, "I want to be a great man one day, like you, Dad." Rest in peace, James. Perhaps we will meet again. Someday, forever and always. (5-MeO-DMT has proven to be one of the more difficult to describe entheogens I have sampled. It has also shown itself to be one of the best, or at least the most meaningful, materials I have ever worked with. Experience number 1. After quite a bit of research and mental preparation, my friend and I set aside an evening to try it. Approximately 3 of the 10 milligrams I had placed in my trusty pyroanalytical device vaporized that first time under the sky near some trees. The effects from the delicious, fragrant smoke were similar effects to a small dose of mushrooms, but with a bit more nausea. I was told by the voice within that my soul was not clean. The reason was due to my on-again, off-again relationship with pain pills. There was a distinct spiritual aspect to the material, in the sense that I felt like who I am was actually part of a higher and greater presence than myself. I was very impressed. The entire trip occurred over the space of about 10 minutes. My friend insisted that I had more to learn at night, and he encouraged me to finish what was left in the pipe. I agreed. This time I was inside on a chair. My friend turned off the light, and within 10 seconds of taking in that tasty smoke, it was apparent that the ride was going to be intense. First, I heard these weird sounds that could be described as buzzing and ringing tryptamine noises. Then, those sounds began to rip my vision, and the very fabric of the universe, wide open. I experienced the frequently described sensation of speeding by in a freight train or being shot out on a rocket ship. I lay down on the ground and was instantly immersed into a world that consisted solely of my ego. It was as though I was swimming in an ocean of myself. The intensity was beyond belief. Suddenly, a choice was given to me: accept all aspects of myself, my life, good and bad, and be in peace, or resist who I am, reject those aspects that comprise me, and face utter terror. I chose acceptance. Instantly, I was held in the arms of God/the universe and told all was well. I basically surrendered myself completely to the experience and just let go in the faith that I was being taken care of by God/the universe. Then, I swam through this universe of love, white light, and visions that transcend well beyond my realm of vocabulary. The experience was absolutely and unspeakably beautiful. A classic +4 peak/mystical experience. The peak, which I call a flash, lasted only about 10 minutes. After that, the effects resembled those of any other psychedelic. There were intense trails, detailed color, and a generally trippy look to the world. I also felt a distinct MDMA-like quality, having a distinct feeling of oneness with the universe. It was very, very spiritual. All in all, 5-MeO-DMT was nothing like I expected. This is no doubt good material and I am very impressed. At no time did I feel even a hint of fear, though I could see the experience being quite terrifying if I resisted the effects. I was held in the hands of the universe and shown unconditional love and acceptance. I became the universe. Then the universe had an orgasm. What a blissful experience. Experience number 2. My second experience occurred some time later. Several months had passed between the 2 trips and I felt again ready to meet with the universe. This time I was by myself. The dose was again 10 milligrams. I took myself, my pipe of 5-MeO-DMT, my CD player with the Pink Floyd song Fearless loaded and ready to go, and made my way outside and sat in a chair besides a tree. I took all of the material in one hit, I held it in, I pressed play on the machine, and I exhaled. I remember nothing of what happened next. There is a period of about 7 minutes, the length of the song Fearless, where I completely blacked out. I eventually became aware of myself again and found myself lying on the ground a few feet from where I originally was sitting. The song was over. At first I had no clue as to what had happened. The world around me was distorted beyond recognition but slowly coming back together. It seemed as though I had been teleported from somewhere else, like I had been spit out from one dimension to the next. Then Saint-Tropez, the next song, started to play, and I suddenly remembered that I just smoked 5 Mayu DMT. Suddenly I was filled with just the greatest feeling of life and existence. It's grand to be alive. I was outside underneath the sun looking at the grass and trees, and it perhaps was the most appreciative I had ever been of nature. Everything was alive and communicating. Suddenly I was remembering some of the concepts my girlfriend always tells me. Be mindful. Psychedelics don't usually automatically change a person, but by taking the lessons we learn from a trip and applying them to our daily lives, we can make the lessons manifest themselves in our actions. This was the message of being mindful. Be mindful of all of your actions. Be mindful of how you conduct yourself with regard to other people. Am I being the best man I can be today? If I am, then I will be a good man tomorrow. By being mindful of myself, I can shape my future in a positive direction, which brings to mind another lesson: live in the here and now. You can't change the past, and it is foolish to focus or worry too much about the future. Fretting over the things we cannot change, the past, or the things we cannot always control, the future, lead to stress in the present. Stress changes behavior, and thus you can end up influencing and changing what could happen down the road otherwise. The future is the product of today, thus our actions today shape what happens tomorrow. I truly felt as though I had regrouped after this experience. As if I ended it all and started again with a clean slate. It was a cleansing experience to the highest degree, and I literally got down on my knees and thanked the universe for my existence and the knowledge and lessons I was shown. As of today, 5 months after the last experience, I have not touched 5 Mayu DMT again. It is to be saved for only those occasions when I feel myself going off the path again. When I forget to take the time to be mindful of myself. When I need to regroup again.